good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. My name is Richard Charlesworth. I'm an Executive Director with IHS Markit based in Dubai. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Eric Y. to present today. He is Senior Consultant for Aramco, based in Dhahran for over 8 years. He's over 30 years in the industry. Before Aramco, he was with Chevron, Atlantic Richfield, and Herven & Gertz. And he is presenting about a topic that will be of interest to all of us: long-term refinery planning in an uncertain environment. Eric, the virtual floor is yours.
Good morning. Thank you, Richard. And thank you all for having me. Today, I'm going to spend the next 15 minutes discussing the long-term planning environment that the refining industry is currently facing. But before I start, a few comments need to be made. While I work for Saudi Aramco, this presentation does not include any material related to Saudi Aramco's market view or forward business plan. It also does not express the opinion of Saudi Aramco on any specific topic. This will be a brief presentation with about 10 slides. We'll start with a discussion of market uncertainty and environmental topics, and then we'll close with an overview of key investment options. The core function of most refineries is to provide gasoline and diesel. Demand forecasting has historically been straightforward due to the strong and stable structure of the vehicle ownership model. Demand drivers don't usually change that much from year to year. While the emergence of electric vehicles is expected to reduce fuel demand, it would normally be seen as a slow-moving transition. Most people don't buy new cars that often, so significant changeover of the vehicle fleet would potentially take decades. The other technologies that could affect demand more quickly are actually driven by software rather than hardware. Autonomous driving, if fully realized, could reduce the cost of rideshare services and account for a larger share of transportation. And lastly, we have virtual presence, which this presentation currently relies on. In more and more cases, the need for physical transportation can be reduced or eliminated altogether. IHS Markit has given us permission to present some of their forecast material. On the right, we have their current demand projection for refined products. Demand appears to grow modestly until 2035 and remains mostly flat afterwards. While electrification of the vehicle fleet is expected to continue, GDP growth and petrochemical feedstock growth are expected to support overall demand into the future. There are, of course, other forecast scenarios which could emerge. They may include more climate change regulation, accelerated technology disruption, and different GDP growth estimates. Long-term planning starts with a well-defined market view. The importance of this cannot be overstated. While margins are currently poor, we need to remember that the refinery plays a key role in the hydrocarbon supply chain. When I started my career, most refineries were differentiated based on whether they focused on gasoline or diesel. In the future, refineries will be more differentiated based on their yield of fuel and non-fuel products. In this new era, CO2 emission monitoring and control has become increasingly important. Refiner CO2 abatement, when necessary, can be achieved through a number of different solutions at different costs. The CO2 abatement curve is a relatively new area and may play a central role in the development of new investments. In the future, reoptimization of the refining business may occur based on CO2 costs. This may lead to changes in energy efficiency, energy sourcing, and product targets. Energy efficiency is an old topic, but improvement of CO2 emissions will require a new set of solutions. The first objective is usually to establish an energy management system, which not only measures real-time CO2 performance, but also facilitates the avoidance of CO2 from operations. Besides energy efficiency, some refiners may look to lower the carbon intensity of their energy sources. That can include low-carbon hydrogen or renewable power. Large-scale investments will increasingly rely on cost-effective CO2 abatement strategies. Geologic storage of CO2 is an important method for CO2 control, and the Middle East region may emerge with important cost advantages in this new area. In this session, I want to briefly introduce the concept case for the circular refinery. In the future, refineries may provide important platforms for waste conversion. Waste oils from used cooking oil or lubricants can be treated and converted into clean fuels. It eliminates waste from the environment and reduces oil requirements. In addition, there has also been new innovation around the conversion of waste plastics to fuel through the use of pyrolysis. And lastly, petcoke may be considered for conversion via gasification. Gasification produces high-quality CO2, which can be removed from the environment and stored underground. While each of these approaches involves a different set of challenges, they may present important opportunities for future development. As many of you are aware, refinery profitability is often driven by the level of resid conversion. The most common and established approach for resid conversion is delayed coking. While delayed coking has been around for a long time, it produces petcoke and has a relatively poor yield pattern. Resid hydrocracking through ebulliting bed technology provides a higher liquid yield relative to delayed coking. It requires more hydrogen and is best suited for locations with low fuel costs. Resid slurry technology has applications that are similar to ebulliting bed, but is expected to provide higher conversion and greater feed flexibility. This is an emerging technology with a lot of potential value. And lastly, there is ARDS RFCC, which is relatively high in cost, but provides a terrific platform for petrochemical integration. If a large amount of fuel oil is available, most refineries are likely to evaluate either delayed coking or resid hydrocracking as part of an upgrading program. Here on the x-axis, we have the amount of fuel oil available for conversion. On the y-axis, we show indicative project returns. While all project proposals are unique, an indicative representation of upgrading economics is shown in the blue and red lines. The solid lines illustrate the response of investment returns to project scale. The dotted lines give an indication of how the expected returns could shift if incremental CO2 emissions had to be abated at an average cost of $50 per ton. If fuel costs are low and investment scale is high, resid hydrocracking is likely to become the preferred approach. With permission from IHS Markit, I have included a graph of cumulative petrochemical demand from 2021 to 2030. The graph shows the increase in demand for ethylene, propylene, paraxylene, and benzene. Average compounded growth rates are near or slightly over 3%, which is in sharp contrast to fuels, where the annual growth is near 1% or less. While some of the ethylene is expected to be sourced from ethane, the remainder accounts for nearly 2.5 million barrels per day of crude oil equivalents over the next 10 years. Not surprisingly, leading refineries are expected to shift their product slate towards petrochemicals. Existing CCR units may be repositioned for aromatics production, while steam cracking may be used to convert light naphtha and LPG into petrochemicals. Propane dehydrogenation can also be used to convert propane to propylene. In the graph on the right, we show indicative project returns as a function of investment scale. Similar to resid upgrading, the scale of the petrochemicals facility is an important driver of economics. In the graph, we also illustrate the impact of CO2 costs on project returns based on $50 per ton. Actual results, however, can vary widely based on the setup of a specific project. So as we've just noted, the current landscape of petrochemical options are likely to include steam cracking, propane dehydrogenation, and paraxylene. Development of these options requires a deep level of technical, economic, and market analysis. Besides the traditional metrics, future assessments may also emphasize oil placement to chemicals, hydrogen yield, capital intensity, and CO2 profile. These considerations are likely to play a key role in the road ahead. To recap, the next period of the refining industry is likely to be characterized by improved environmental performance, new approaches to resid upgrading, and greater petrochemical integration. While the current business environment is quite challenging, it's important to recognize that the right refineries are now more important than ever. This concludes my presentation, and I thank you for your time. I will now open up the session to questions.
All right, thanks, Eric. A very interesting presentation. We'll start a brief Q&A now. And as we are in the Middle East, the first question is about that. You mentioned that the Middle East region would realize certain advantages in the refining sector. Could you please elaborate more on exactly what you meant by that?
Sure thing. So refineries in the Middle East are usually positioned to run their own crude. They are in fact very important assets in the integrated value chain. And some of the refineries in the region are also very large. They have the system scale that is needed for petrochemical and resid conversion projects. They also have important advantages in fuel cost. They are likely to have efficient solutions for CO2 control, and they are likely to have better access to capital. All in all, that's a pretty important set of advantages.
Okay, thanks. So my background is petrochemicals, and within IHS we are very much looking at the integration of petrochemicals being vital for refineries. You mentioned that not all refineries will be able to make that transition, while some will. Could you explain more about that, the key criteria for petrochemical integration?
Sure. So ethylene is usually one of the primary targets for a petrochemical project. Capital costs for a world-scale ethylene complex may exceed $6 billion pretty easily, and would require roughly 100,000 barrels per day of liquids if there was no ethane in the feed mix. Very few refineries actually have access to that type of capital and processing volume. Paraxylene offers an easier route for most refineries, but scale considerations are also limiting. The scale of a paraxylene complex is typically limited by the refinery's gasoline balance. Some reformate aromatics are needed to upgrade light naphtha into gasoline. The chemicals market is also highly competitive and requires substantial technical and market know-how, which isn't readily available to a lot of existing refiners.
Okay, thanks for that. My next question is on the resid conversion for the non-refiners amongst us. Your presentation highlighted the differences between resid hydrocracking and delayed coking, but what are the key takeaways from this part of the discussion, especially for the Middle East refiners?
Well, as I noted earlier, advantaged fuel costs are certainly very important, and that is one of the key advantages for the Middle East region. And because of the fuel cost advantage, many systems are likely to favor resid hydrocracking over delayed coking in the future. The capital intensity of resid hydrocracking is relatively high, but the yields are significantly better. Middle East crudes in general are also good fits for catalytic resid conversion technologies. Fuel oil pricing, if we look at it from a margin perspective, fuel oil pricing is also lower in the Middle East versus the Far East, which provides additional economic support for conversion projects here.
Okay, that's great. So next question is circular economy. This is, of course, a hot topic with many energy companies obviously moving to more circularity in their strategies, zero carbon, etc. So the circular refining concept clearly has a lot of environmental benefits. What do you think are the biggest opportunities in this area?
Well, I think it's still very early in this area, and it's a bit hard to say. Certainly, the option of recycling plastic waste into fuel and utilities offers the potential to remove plastics from the environment. In addition, we think that pet coke, is a very large potential opportunity case that needs to be studied further. Pet coke is nearly 90% carbon. So coke gasification combined with carbon capture may provide a way to generate clean energy and reduce CO2 emissions. It's a very complex and capital-intensive approach, so it's going to take a long time and a lot of resources to develop those cases. But it could turn out to be a very important opportunity.
Okay. So we have time for one more question, and that's just related to circularity about refinery efficiency improvement. So if refineries are looking to reduce their carbon dioxide performance, where do you think they're most likely to find improvement?
So there have been a lot of broad surveys and studies in this area. I think a detailed and robust energy management system is the most important first task, as I noted earlier. Measuring and monitoring CO2 emissions is an important first step, which sets the stage for better CO2 control. Energy efficiency improvements are often most found in the crude unit system. Improvements in the preheat train and energy recovery are often good places to start. Anti-fouling agents and improvement in low-grade heat are often mentioned as other ways to capture benefits. It's really an area that has to be studied very closely, but I think most refineries will be able to improve their CO2 performance.
Okay. Well, thanks for the Q&A session. I think from an IHS perspective, you certainly addressed the key hot topics that our clients are asking us for more critical information on. So I hope everyone has enjoyed that presentation. Please get in touch with Eric if you have any other questions, and please enjoy the remaining sessions of the GDA conference.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard.
Thanks.